Welcome, dear viewers, to the Bruno and Lincio transmission, number 14. Lincio, you and I both have the same colored t-shirt. Why is this? And how are you today?
Sto bene, grazie, caro Bruno, a Milano. Buonasera a tutti dalla Nuova Zelanda. Benvenuto a Bruno e Linzio. Sono Linzio, lui è Bruno, and questo è, as you said, l'episodio 14. My goodness, what a week it's been since we last spoke. And when we last spoke, that week had been explosive enough. But in the time since, we had the State of the Union address, and we had occasional Cortex's Green New Deal that will ban aeroplanes. I love that they're doing this because they're exposing themselves as the stupid, evil half-wits that they are, supported by Yawon Book and the Ayn Rand Institute. That's the salutary part of it. But there she is, and she wants to give welfare to those unwilling to work, in other words, lazy fucks. She wants to ban oil and gas, which is exactly what our Prime Minister has done here in New Zealand, who's an occasional Cortex lookalike. She wants to nationalise healthcare. She wants to make veganism compulsory. I knew it would come to this in the end. We're no longer allowed to eat meat because she wants to ban cows, because cows fart and create greenhouse gases. How ridiculous can it get? So, I call her occasional Cortex, but all of this shows her Cortex is not even occasional. It just simply does not exist. But prior to her breaking out like that, we had the State of the Union from our orange hero, our orange sun god. And honestly, I'm going back way before you were born. It took me back to Reagan. That speech was equal, maybe beyond anything that Reagan ever did. I watched every one of Reagan's states of the Union, and they were wonderful. They made me feel optimistic and uplifted and positive about the future of America. But this one by Trump the other night, I think beyond that. We are born free and we will stay free. America will never be a socialist country. Yawon Book, eat your non-existent heart out, you scumbag. This is not the villain of our time. This is the hero of our time. And that was my sentiment watching State of the Union the other night. Did you see it from Milano?
I must confess I only watched part of it because I've read the whole transcript. But I remember perfectly well. I watched some of the clips. So I've seen Nancy Pelosi,
Oh
Schumer,
boy.
Ocasio. It's too bad Yawon Book wasn't there. I saw all their faces cringe in despair at this president that actually stands up for something. A Republican that actually does what he says, that speaks what he feels. It's quite amazing. It's like we have the temperament of the Democrats inside a civilized Republican in Trump. So that's very good. I thought it was a good State of the Union. Of course, I'm still waiting for the wall, and I do not want the most immigrants ever to come legally. But I think that's, you know, that's just rhetoric. So we'll, if he gets the wall done, I will, you know, I'll forgive him for these mistakes.
Oh, well, no, I'm as frustrated as you are about the wall, but what does he have to do? I think he's going through the process of going through the motions of playing the game so that when it's all over, he can say, I did everything I had to do to accommodate them, and they would not accommodate me. So then he will declare his state of emergency and just do it. That, that's what I want. But I believe him when he said the other night in the State of the Union, I will get it built. This is Donald Trump. I don't think he's going to say a thing like that if he's not going to follow through. But I agree with you about all the faces, and I made a list of them. It struck me as very curious that when it's deemed a face crime, to quote Orwell, a face crime to smirk, and the Covington did so-called smirked against that dinky little savage with his primitive rum, what we saw in the face of the State of the Union was the Schumer smirk, as you say. That the look on Schumer's face showed him to be the evil lowlife that he truly is, supported by Yawon Book. We had the Bernie scowl. Did you love the Bernie scowl when Trump said we'll never be a socialist country? And there was Bernie. But I
love that.
loved also the Pelosi, the denture malfunction. Were her false teeth in danger of falling out or something? Why was she through the whole thing? I mean, she clearly did not want to be there, and she shouldn't, of course, be there, evil creature that she is. But so there was the false teeth malfunction, and we had occasional cortex and her gargoyle grimace at that we will never be a socialist country moment. But overall, we had the ugly women in white, the ugly women who've been on marches and all the rest of it. And you know, the first thing I did after the State of the Union, I thought to myself, this is so reminiscent of earlier occasions with what was then, way back again before you were born, in my time, we had a thing called the New Left. So let's call that now the old New Left. We now have the new Left. But remember, Ayn Rand published a book, which was a collection of her essays called The New Left, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. And after Trump's address, I thought, you know, what I'm going to do is pull that book out of my bookshelf and open it at any random page, and I'm going to quote from that page when I'm talking to Bruno next, because I know whatever page I open it at, what she says will be opposite. And guess what? I opened it up, and I swear this is not premeditated. This is authentically spontaneous. I opened it up in an essay, page 174, The Age of Envy. And may I now quote? And this is so apposite. Just remember the ugly women's marches that we've seen in recent days. And remember also, in my day, in the 60s, we had ugly women's lib. They weren't as bad as the current lot. But this was Ayn Rand's response to ugly women's lib in the 60s. Some men believe that women are irrational, illogical, incompetent, emotion-driven, and unreliable. I can't imagine anyone thinking such a thing. Women's Lib sets out to disprove it by the spectacle of sloppy, bedraggled, unfocused females stomping down the streets and chanting brief slogans over and over again with the stuporous monotony of a jungle ritual and the sulkiness of a badly spoiled child. Denouncing masculine oppression, Women's Lib screams protests against the policy of regarding women as sex objects through speakers who all too obviously are in no such danger. Proclaiming women's independence from and equality with men, Women's Lib demands liberation from the consequences of whatever sex life a woman might choose, such consequences to be borne by others. It demands free abortions and free day nurseries to be paid for. By whom? By men. The sex views professed by Women's Lib are so hideous that they cannot be discussed, at least not by me. To regard man as an enemy, to regard woman as a combination of matriarch and stevedore, to surpass the futile sordidness of a class war by instituting a sex war, to drag sex into politics and around the floor of smoke-filled back rooms as a tool of the pressure group jockeying for power, to proclaim spiritual sisterhood with lesbians and to swear eternal hostility to men, is so repulsive a set of premises, from so loathsome a sense of life, that an accurate commentary would require the kind of language I do not like to see in print. Is there something worse than the women of the Lib movement? Yes. The men who support it. The fact that there are such men is a clue to that grotesque phenomenon. Unquote. Would it not be nice to have that kind of moral clarity and ferocity from the Ayn Rand Institute at the moment, as opposed to their Objectivism? I do miss her. It's the one woman who's an exception to her own imperative that no woman should ever run for president. No woman should, especially now, and not these women, but she should have. President Ayn Rand.
Oh, wow. That sounded, exactly like your one book. No difference whatsoever there. Did you notice any difference? No, I don't think so. Wow. Well, I think there's nothing else to say on that women's, ugly women's. You got to the point quite well, so why don't we move on to the next one?
Right, is that for me? I just wanted to say that with occasional, well, first of all, let's just go back to the State of the Union with that we are born free and we will stay free. I think that will prove to be Donald Trump's Ronald Reagan moment. Again, going back to before you were born. I hate to keep doing this, but we do have some good memories, we old farts. And one of those was Ronald Reagan at the Berlin Wall in 1987 saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And all of his advisors had tried to persuade him to take that line out of his speech, just as Trump's advisors keep trying to tell him to take his controversial lines out of his speeches. But that one, know whether people were attempting to persuade him to take it out. We are born free and we will stay free. America will never be a socialist country. But that, I think, is destined to be his Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall line.
I mean, just he keeps doing this. I mean, remember at the UN, he called out socialism. He calls out socialism every year, every 6 months. and of course he's considered a nationalist by the Yuan Book Institute. So that's evil, evil, evil. You can't have national capitalism. That's evil. You have to have free trade with communist China, or else you are a xenophobe, racist. So we can't have that, obviously. We can't have nativism. You can't prefer, you can't look after your own people before you look after others. Of course not. And on this point, I would like to point out two things. So the first thing is, there's a difference between egoism, selfish, rational, enlightened self-interest, and autism. So if
Go on. I'm really fascinated to hear you expound on that, because this has become a big thing, in my view, in the last year or two. I've come to think that orgoism not only doesn't distinguish between the two, it embraces autism. But go on. I want to hear what you have to say.
of course, it embraces autism because it does not. I mean, if you do not put your values, as in other people, other things outside of yourself, before non-values or lower values, you are being an autist. You're just thinking about, oh, my illegal Mexican gardener is more important than my neighbor's son getting a job in the summer, right? So it's more important to, but of course this goes back to the fact you said a common culture is the basis of a functioning nation.
No, I
So,
didn't say that. Ayn Rand said that. That was my quoting her about nationalism.
right, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, Ayn Rand said that. So it's clear that these autistic people, they do not, they're not part of the culture. They do not value other Americans any more than they value the first Mexican that crosses the border illegally. They value them exactly the same as any American, which is zero. They care not about one and not about the other. They only care about their little petty interests, which are, autistic. They do not value other people the way other normal human beings do. If your society, if you not put your society before that of others, then what kind of selfishness is that? That's not selfishness, that's autism. Selfishness, rational, egoism, has to have this contextual values, these values that are outside of yourself. So that's the first point. But I see you really want to get into this point, so please indulge us right
Well,
now.
I just wanted to say, since you raised the subject of autism, this is only something that has come to me in the past couple of days, because on YouTube, as you can imagine, I do not subscribe to the ARI or Yawan book, but YouTube, because it's very smart, recognizes that I have an interest in related subjects. So it keeps presenting me on my YouTube page with Yawan book. And in the last couple of days, there have been a couple of new videos, and I couldn't tolerate either of them for more than 2 minutes, but they were very illuminating. The first one was Yawan to camera. And as you observed last time, that is not a pretty spectacle, because he's way too close to the camera, and he shouldn't be, because he's not a naturally attractive person. So there's this leering gargoyle right there in the camera before you. But the advantage of having him that close to the camera was when you study it for a couple of minutes, you can see certain things. The eyes were going left to right, left to right, left to right, as though he were watching a sped up game of tennis. And not only that, but he was up and down, like a jack in a box. And I just watched this. I didn't listen to what he was saying. I've no idea what he was talking about. But I thought, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. And as I say, after 2 minutes, couldn't take it anymore. But I clicked on the next video, which was a debate between Yawan and a socialist. And all I observed, again, I only took in a couple of minutes, was that when the socialist was speaking or Yawan was being introduced, he couldn't sit still. Fidgeting, farting around and putting his hands in his pockets, taking them out and changing his position in his chair. And when he was up actually speaking, because he had a handheld mic, roving around the stage, left to right, just like his eyes in the solo video, and also leaping up and down like a revivalist preacher. And I just thought to myself, all right, I'm not clinically qualified to say what's wrong here, but something is wrong. Seriously wrong. So to the friends of Yawan, help him out. There's a problem. You brought up autism. I don't know if that's what it is. I've no idea. But it's not helpful to our cause. He's manic. There's some kind of mania, which may be related to his Trump derangement syndrome.
It's called egomania. He's an egomaniac. He is a narcissist. That's what he is.
Oh, okay. But that's false egoism, and that's very important that you raise that, because, you know, we're both reading the journals at the moment, and Ayn Rand, who was not around to see the discovery of narcissism, in her day it was called megalomania, but the information about it was very scant. She did not know about it. Had she known about it, she would have been even more intent on distinguishing what she called egoism from egotism with a T. Remember, she made that distinction in her introduction to the 25th anniversary of publication of The Fountainhead. And she said, I would correct that now. If she were here now, she would go further and say, my rational egoism is not Yawan Book's narcissism and the narcissism of most of the culture, which Yawan Book is pandering to.
Yes, indeed. Well, while we're on the topic of Objectivism, I think I've come up with a possible explanation of the psychological mechanism by which equalism is a must hold on to idea. So the idea that there is no differences between human beings, between individuals, between groups, between populations, between male and female, and so forth, this idea, I believe, is part of a larger. So if we take objectivism as being part of a larger group of philosophies that are based on reason, and where the main point is reason. So let's take Hans Hoppe from last week, right? I read from Hans Hoppe. So he is obviously very much into reason. You know, he's libertarian. It's all, almost you could say, a little rationalistic. It's all this reason here, reason there. It all makes perfect sense. Why aren't people accepting it? And so his solution is that people are not going to accept it, so we should separate from those people and make our own communities, so we'll just keep them out. Now, in Objectivism at the moment, they're still at the position where they cannot accept that there are differences between people, because this would crash their idea that if only everyone were rational, everything would be perfect on Earth. So if only I convince enough people to be objectivists, then everything will be perfectly fine. But this assumes that other people, first of all, want to become objectivists, or rights respecting, or and so forth, or want to become perfect rational human beings, etc., etc., or what they think is rational, because obviously we do not agree that they are rational at all. So it's this idea that if only people would be rational, then everything would be all right. And in order to have that, you must believe that everyone is capable of reaching that point. Everyone is willing to spend, hours, months, years of his life studying philosophy, studying the intricacies of epistemology and this and that. They think that if people only did this, that everything would be all right. But that's not reality. So the non-equalist position recognizes reality for what it is, or other human beings for what they are, different. And by recognizing this, not only do we salvage expectations and mental health, but we are able to abandon the mistaken idea of equalism and its effects, and we can start having a serious conversation of what to do. But even more importantly, maybe, it gives other people it gives the judgment of these leftivists, the judgment of a rational human being now that has thrown away Objectivism, thrown away equalism, thrown away all these ideas. He can now stop being so judgmental towards other people, in the sense that regular, normal human beings that are not some kind of philosophers or perfect rational and this and this and that, they are perfectly fine. They are wonderful human beings, and that's much better than the idea that, we're all the same, so if he's not thinking what I'm thinking, if he's not accepting my idea, then he must be evil. So that's the difference there. And so happy premises to everyone from me. So the premises you should be looking at are the premises of equalism and the corollaries of if only everyone were perfectly rational. So there you have it.
Well, I think every human being worthy of the title, and as you know, I make a distinction between human and subhuman, but every human being is capable of being rational. That's what makes him or her a human being. I don't think that anyone is predestined to be human or subhuman, that is to say, anyone who resembles biologically a human being. I don't think any such entity is predestined to be human or subhuman. I think every such entity is potentially human, that is to say, can exercise its rational faculties. So we may have a point of departure here. I don't think there are any intrinsic differences among people who are biologically human. There are no intrinsic differences among them that make any of them incapable of rational thought. And that's regardless of skin color and all such incidental differences. I think what interferes is culture. And it so happens that our Western culture, which it so happens is predominantly white, is far and away the most rational, the most civilized, the most efficacious culture that has ever existed on the face of this earth. And we should be able to recognize that without being labeled racist and Islamophobic and all the rest of it. It's simply recognizing the fact that Western culture is superior. It does happen to be white, but I'm of the view that people who are not white, who embrace European or Western cultural values, will become every bit as intelligent, as civilized as those who are white, who embrace Western values. Do we have a point of departure here?
I wasn't thinking about race at all, actually. But if you want to make that clarification, that's perfectly fine. I was thinking of everyday normal human beings that walk down the street, you know, my neighbor and this and that. No, I don't think there is a point of departure. I think there needs to be new words utilized. So reason is not a sufficient descriptor. So reason is too. I, I, I don't think there is such a thing as a non-rational human being, but that's because reason is such a wide abstraction. What I mean is the ability to be logical and truthful and to discern. I mean, just think of the power of rhetoric, of this Ocasio-Cortez, whatever the hell.
Oh, yeah.
So she is making literally no good points, but she is using her, oh, I'm so cute, I'm this Latina, and I'm so young, and I'm the first time in Congress, and look at me, I want to save the world. That's what's convincing people. And this is my challenge, so this may be the point of departure. I would challenge you to find any time in human history where let's say, half the population was able to discern that. I don't think there is such a time and place. So it has always been a question of culture. I agree, but the difference now is that the cultural elites no longer have rationality as their point of reference. So I would agree with Ayn Rand when she says that if the intellectuals are an elite, so the philosophers are an elite, this is a very, very small portion of the population, and only they are capable of doing this, and they, right now, have chosen to be evil. So that's...
Yes. No, and that's my point. That's the point I keep making to you, that they have chosen to be evil. I brought along a prop. What's that?
What a nice watermelon.
That's a watermelon. So what's distinctive about a watermelon?
It's green on the outside and red inside.
And which color is more preponderant?
The
right.
red.
But unlike a watermelon, the greens, unlike the greens, the watermelon is delicious and good for humanity, and I'm going to devour that when we've finished our transmission. But you see, occasional cortex, who's pushing this the green-red agenda, where we ban fossil fuels and make veganism compulsory. I just want to make a point that I keep making, and I cannot get through with it, but I am going to keep making it, because what I discovered is that George Orwell knew this long before I mentioned it. So I'm going back now to his novel, 1984, and he's portraying the protagonist, Winston, overhearing a demonstration, what was it called? The hate group, the hate crowd, the hate hour, where people got together. This is just like the Ugly Women's March, right? So in 1984, his novel, he had people doing this. And remember, he wrote this in 1948. But he's talking about the speaker who was addressing the crowd. And this is what he said. Now, remember this in relation to occasional cortex and Kamala Harris and every upward inflecting, fry-quacking woman that I ever criticized. Quote, as he watched the eyeless face with the jaw moving rapidly up and down, God, that's Nancy Pelosi. Winston had a curious feeling that this was not a real human being, but some kind of dummy. It was not the man's brain that was speaking, it was his larynx. Larynx. The stuff that was coming out of him consisted of words, but it was not speech in the true sense. It was a noise uttered in unconsciousness, like the quacking of a duck. Now, I swear to you, when I launched my campaign against quacking, I'd forgotten that. I had read that at school, and I reread it recently, but I came across it again in the rereading, and I thought, how did George Orwell know that this was going to be the sound of evil in 2019? And that's occasional cortex. Listen to her saying, oh, like the world is going to end in 12 days if we don't do something, if we don't ban the eating of meat. How did George Orwell know that in 1948?
He had a crystal ball. There's no other explanation. Wow, that was really entertaining because I just realized, Lincio, did you write that, or did Orwell write
Well,
that?
no, you can't tell the difference. And next time, I won't do it now, but I will quote something from what he wrote in his non-fiction about why this is important. In fact, I will read it now. Modern English, especially written English, is full of bad habits, which spread by imitation and which can be avoided if one is willing to take the necessary trouble. If one gets rid of these habits, one can think more clearly, and to think clearly is a necessary first step towards political regeneration, so that the fight against bad English is not frivolous and is not the exclusive concern of professional writers. So that's George Orwell. What he knew is extraordinary. But that's what's going on. So when you see these stupid, ugly, evil women, all you can do is agree with Ayn Rand, no woman should ever be president.
Yes, I agree perfectly with Orwell there. In fact, the sounds that come out of the Yawan Book Institute, I just can't tolerate it. It's as if what you are saying somehow infects your sound cords, and if it's too evil, somehow it'll come out ugly. But no, that can't be right because, of course, there's very, very seductive and well.
They will not make aesthetic judgments. Bruno, do you get that? They steer clear of aesthetics. So you've got Yuan and that ugly, both visually and audio-wise, ugly. Amy, who actually was on Tucker Carlson just before I came on with you, and she was good with him. She was right in the discussion they were having, but we'll never talk about aesthetics. Tucker and Amy were discussing whether smartphones should be banned because they've created such stupidity. They're not, well, smartphones they may be called, but they've created idiots. And Amy very well made the point that the idiots were already created by the state education system, which is exploited by the creators of the smartphones, who have no vested interest in making people smart. And so you have an evil compounding upon itself. Amy didn't make the point as eloquently as I just did, but she was in the right in that argument. But overall, Ayn Rand Institute make no argument based on aesthetics at all, because half of their members are embrace head-banging, caterwauling, and if they don't do that, they have no idea about the evil of the fry-quacking that you and I are just now talking about, and that George Orwell knew about in 1948. How much smarter was he than Yawon Book?
Much smarter, I would say. But I see the same thing more or less happening in Italian, though not as bad. I would say nothing is as bad as California. No, literally, nothing is as bad as California right now, in the West, of course. That is the nest of evil. That is where everything ugly starts, in every sense of the word. Everything ugly starts there, and then it just pours into everyone's TV screen and cinema, and they watch it in Kazakhstan and in Mongolia, and everyone gets infected with this ugly, ugly nonsense.
And do you know what a cultural ideal you live in right now? I just got back after 18 years of not having it, my vinyl collection. The LPs at 10 inches and 45s from play on a turntable with a needle. You understand what I'm saying? This is, I know this is, I'm going back a ways.
I do. I have that. I have those things in my house.
Here was what I was listening to before we started recording. Teatro alla Milano, with the most brilliant singers and the most glorious music, including your compatriot Verdi, who's buried quite close to where you are now. I think you wouldn't approve of him because he liked the unification of Italy, and you want to split it up into 1,000 pieces. But he was brilliant, and he wrote that Requiem Mass is one of the most glorious pieces of music ever written. Now, when humanity as a whole, and I know that Objectivists hate such expressions, but when humanity as a whole can appreciate the Verdi Requiem Mass, then we will have some hope of survival. And I think we've gone well beyond our 30 minutes. You've tricked me into doing this.
I was hoping you wouldn't.
I did notice. I just didn't have the bell on. So.
All right, no more tricks. Thank you everyone for watching, and let us know what you thought of the discussion in the comments. Bye bye.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
we've got 3, 2, 1.
Moga.
Make objectivism great again.
And repudiate Objectivism.
Objectivism. Yawon Book.